We are on Daf Yutes Amid Base, about 12 lines down. Actually, let's start from a little higher up, 7 lines down. Halach Barishan, V'nichnes, Hiza V'shana V'tavel. I don't remember exactly what we got up to yesterday, but I think this is a good starting point. If he went into this, again, we brought the brisa. This is the second part of the brisa that we had discussed. The first part had been where there were 2 roads, 2 paths. So one of them had a tameh on it, and he went on he went on both of them, and then he went into the Beis Hamikdash. That's the first case. This is the second case. There were 2 paths, same physical situation. There were 2 paths. One of them had a tum on it. There was a dead person underneath it. We don't know which one. So halach v'rishon, he went on one of them, a suffix whether it was tameh or not, but nichnes, and he went to the Beis Hamikdash. So he went to the Beis Hamikdash after a suffix tum. Hiza v'shana v'tavel. He was maza, and then he repeated the hazah, and then he was taivel, which is he made himself fully tar. Chazar v'halach b'sheni. Then he went on the second path. So in one of those 2 paths, there certainly was tumah, but he was tar. If you had become tameh, if it was by the first path, he was already tar from it, and now he's going back a second time into the Beis Hamikdash v'nichnes chayiv. We said Tanakam said Yechayiv. Rav Shimon paiter. Rav Shimon says you pater. In fact, the Gemara v'amai chayiv safek yedihu. How can he be chayiv? We know that the din of a oila v'yared is that prior to going into the Beis Hamikdash, he had to have known for certain that he was tameh. This person, we're talking about when he's going in now the second time. So it's true he might have gone in the first time, but then when he went in the first time, he certainly did not know whether he was tameh because he only went into something that was a suffix. When he went into the second one, had he become tameh the first time, he was already tar from that. So now again, he's a suffix the second time as well. So why would it be? How could you say that Yechayiv carbon oil of a yared if the person, when he went into the Beis Hamikdash, is not certain that he was tameh, Thomas Mace? Amar Rabbi Yechanan kan asu suffix yediyah ki yediyah. Rabbi Yechanan says there's a pasuk, we'll learn from a pasuk that tells you that even though it's only a suffix yediyah, we treat it as yediyah. Reish Lakish Amar Hamani Rabbi Yishmael hidamaloi be'inan yediyah betchila. Rabbi Lakish says no, it's not a pasuk, it's not a special halacha here, it's not a pasuk, but rather it's Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael is the man the Amar who says that you can have the idea of he says you could be tameh for forgetting, for having a helam of either tumah or of mikdash, which is like Rebbe, but he holds you don't need yediyah altogether. Therefore, the fact that you didn't have yediyah before and the fact that you didn't know that you were tameh is irrelevant. So that's the way Rish Lakish has
you might not be tameh in this case.
No.
Which Moses says you don't need.
No, because
yeah, according to Shmuel, you don't need yediyah betchila, but you definitely were tameh. Here it's a suffix tameh.
Yeah, so we're talking about where in the end he finds out that he was tameh. The question is about the yediyah. We're talking about in the end he finds out. The question is you have to have a yediyah beforehand in order to be a chayav carbon oil of yair. Right? You have to have a yediyah betchila and a yediyah b'sayf.
And so
you had a yediyah b'sayf. I mean, I misstated it. I was talking too much about the yediyah.
If it's definitely tameh, right? You find it tameh, then how there shouldn't be pater?
Because according to Hashem, because he didn't have a yediyah betchila. His yediyah at the time was not a yediyah.
Oh.
Right? You need both elements. According to Rav Shimon and Rebbe and all, according to Rabbi Akiva and all the other
It's not about it's not a suffix. It's just that in other words, it's all about. I don't understand. Why do you need why do you need a case where one was tar, one was tameh? It's practical. Just to give an example,
I don't understand what your question is.
we're saying now it's not a question of if it's a suffix tamei or not. It's a question of idea.
Rav Shimon says you're still going to be potter because there's no yediyah. The
Right.
Tanakh says this is sufficient yediyah. So the question is, why is that a sufficient yediyah? L'chayra, he doesn't have
I'm saying,
yediyah.
according to that, but why do we need a case where he went down a path that was one was
Because
tar?
we want to say, in spite of the fact that he certainly was tamei beforehand, before coming in, he's still even so he's still potter.
But I'm saying, why do you need a case where one road was tar and one road was tamei? It's not about knowing if it's not about the suffix tamei. It's a question of idea.
No, but the idea, the point is, what does he know when he goes in? So he knows. I guess I hear what you're saying. You're saying that the original idea before he went in the first time is over with. But if you add up the sum of it, he knows that one of the two times he went in, he was tamei. So I think that's the. You're asking let's see the Gemara, because the Gemara will ask also what is the chiddush of this.
He definitely didn't have an idea before he went on these paths.
Well, no, right. He knew that these places was sfekas. He knew that this place was a suffix tamei.
He knew that one of them
was tamei. Yeah,
he didn't have an idea.
Right, but is that sufficient yediyah to satisfy what the Gemara requires?
It's a suffix idea.
Right. That's he has a suffix yediyah. Is a suffix.
It's not really idea like we had before in the mission. This is a suffix idea.
Right.
That's a sort of a sub-category of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's and the Gemara is asking, look, what does yediyah mean? Yediyah means knowledge. So that's Gemara's question essentially. What kind of yediyah is a suffix yediyah? The whole point of yediyah is knowing something. If you don't know it for sure, that's basically you don't know it. Yediyah means knowing. If you say, if you ask someone a multiple choice question, you say a true or false question, and he answers you, well, I know it's either true or false. You haven't really answered much. It's not really, you don't really know anything.
So there's the idea is lacking.
Right.
But that would be like, okay, I guess if you only choose one path. But if he eventually ends up on both and going to Beis Hamikdash after both, then that uncertainty is out the window. That's
the first case of the Mishnah. But in this case, he was toivel between the first and second case.
But he went into the Beis Hamikdash after going at each path.
Yeah.
So there's no suffix. He knows.
If you add everything together, right, both of his yediyas, he knows that one of the two times he went into the Beis Hamikdash.
Yes.
But each one is it's like subdivided again, right? It's like each yediyah is only before he goes in, only a partial yediyah. It's not full.
Right, but if you put it together, it's a certainty. It's a certain idea.
Right. Yes, that's enough Camino. But in any case, so they each had their own explanations. Rabbi Yechanan said, even though it's only a suffix yediyah at the time he went in, now he's going in the second time, right? The first time you agree he wasn't. When he went into the Beis Hamikdash the first time, he was only a suffix. That's right, clear.
Yes, that's clear.
Now he goes into the second time. Had he become tamei the first time, he can't now retroactively become chayiv for that first time he went in, right? You can't say, oh, now that's over with. And he was a suffix yediyah then. Now he's going in. So this going in now is only a suffix. You can't relitigate the original time you went in. So now it's its own suffix, and this time that's the Gemara's question. How that's what Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish are trying to answer. How could you be chayiv for that going in the second time? The first time you went in is over and done with. The second time, if it had been the first one, then now he's not going in betumo. So it's only a suffix. You don't know. So Rabbi Yochanan says it's a Gzeres HaKasev, and Rish Lakish says we're talking according to Mandam, who says you don't need Yediyah altogether, so this whole thing is irrelevant. Sakduma, Varami de Rabbi Yochanan de Rabbi Yochanan, Varami de Rish Lakish de Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan was sizing himself, and Rish Lakish was sizing himself. The Tanya, Achol Safak Chelev V'Noida, Safak Chelev V'Noida. Someone ate something, he's not sure if it was Chelev or not, which is Chayiv, Malchus, and Karas. And he was informed that he had eaten chaylev, that it's safek chaylev, and therefore he has to bring an asham tali. Again, you bring a chatas if you know something for sure. You bring a asham tali if you're told that you might have eaten something b'shay. He didn't even know before he ate it that it was a safek, and afterwards he's told, this was a safek, so he has to bring an asham tali. And then he was told about it, and then he did it again. The same thing happened again. Rebbe says, "Kashem shemevi chatas al kol echad ve'echad, kach mevi asham toli al kol echad ve'echad." Rebbe says that if you would have had this same thing, where someone he ate something, and afterwards he was told not that it's a suffix, but he's told it's a vadai, and then he went and ate another piece, and he's told about it, and he would bring then he would bring two chatayis. He was informed in between that it was a vadai. So just like he would bring a chatas on each one, kach maybe asham tali al kol echad ve'echad. Let's see the Rashi on this. Okay, we'll see. Reb Shimon Yehuda, Reb Elazar, Reb Shimon Amru, Mishum Reb Shimon. I shouldn't have said that pshat because that's really one of the two pshat. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Reb Elazar, Reb Shimon Amru, Mishum Reb Shimon. He only brings one asham tali, even though he was informed in between that he was chayiv and asham tali on the first one. He ate after he ate the first piece of chaylev, the eighth piece of meat, that's the suffix, and then he was informed after the second one. He only brings one. Shenema al shigase asher shagag. The Torah says al shigase, which is a lashon rabbim asher shagag, and then it says he brings his asham. HaTorah ripsu shgagas harbe v'asham tali echad. Since the Torah used the lashon rabbim on the shgagas, and it only says asham, he brings an asham with lashon, a singular lashon. So that's mashma that you only bring one asham tali, no matter how many times you might have made a mistake of eating something b'shaygig. So even though this person did it twice, the Torah says that you only bring one asham tali for both of them. Okay, so that's Rav Shimon. That's the second shot. But Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan argue about what Rebbe held. Rebbe said you bring on each one. V'amar Rish Lakish kan shana Rebbe yediyas sveikas mischalkas l'chatoyis. Rebbe, the reason for Rebbe why he says it's separate is because he holds yediyas sveikas gets separated into separate chatas. Let's see the Rashi. Kan shana Rebbe yediyas sveikas mischalkas l'chatoyis. V'hachei kam Rebbe sheyoyda lo la'achaz man shechelev haya. Yavi chatas al kol echad ve'echad. When he's going to find out later on that it was chelev, he's going to bring a chatas on each one. Even though sheyadiyas suffix shahoysol ben time, even though he was told in between that it's a suffix, that maybe that this was a suffix chelev, mischalkas, that is enough to make it into two separate isurim. The loyna heavy shnei zeise chelev behelam echad. It's not considered as eating one two zaysim, two kazaisim in the same forgetting. So too, kach kol zman shlo noidelo shehein vade chelev ela safek chelev maybe asham toli al kol achas v'achas mediton shemaybe chaz kol achas tzriolei yediyas safek mischalkas l'chatois. So he's saying, according to Rabbi, who is this? According to Reish Lakish, he's saying that we're talking about the same case. But Rebbe's taina is that if it would be a chatas, because you find out at the end that both of those pieces of meat that you ate are vadai chelev, it's going to be separated by the fact that in between you were told that the first piece is a suffix chaylev, because he holds that a suffix chaylev is enough. A suffix yediyah is enough to make you to separate it, to make it into an isser. So this is problematic because before Reish Lakish had said he had to say that we're talking about going according to Rabbi Yishmael in our case of the two paths. He was not willing to accept that a suffix yediyah is sufficient, right? In our original thing that we were talking about, we said it comes down to whether finding out a suffix yediyah is enough. And Rabbi Yochanan said we learn from a pasuk it is. Rishlaka said no, I don't accept that. A suffix yediyah is not sufficient. But over here, as far as separating into two chiyuvei malchus or two chiyuvei asham tali, we say we're talking about asham tali here. We say that it is enough to be mechalak. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Kashem sheyadiyas vade ba'am mischalkas chatois kach yadiyas suffix mischalkas la'ashamis." Rabbi Yochanan says it doesn't. We're not talking over here about a suffix yediyah. He says just like in general, if someone does a chatas b'shayig and he finds out that in between that he was over, and then he does another thing b'shayig, the fact that he found that in between that he was fully chayiv, that's what's mischalika, but he holds that a suffix is not enough. So, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, we had said that we do say asu yediyah suffix. He had said we do legabi the two paths. We do say yediyah suffix is mechalik, and over here legabi b'mechuyev two asham talis. We say we compare it to chatas, and by chatas a yediyah suffix is not enough to mechalik. It's just only because you had like a chatas, where you had a yediyas vadai. So Zaktamar Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan kasha kan asu b'loy b'chol ha'Torah kula asu. Says it's not a comparison. We said Rabbi Yochanan says we learned out kan asu over here. The Torah gave us a pasuk that teaches us legabi the din of oila v'yored that a yediyas suffix is going to be like a yediyas vadai, but it has nothing to do with the question of whether you mechayev two asham talis, which is a different carbon altogether. Over here, since the Torah didn't tell you directly that you need a dira, but rather we deduce it from the fact that the Torah says v'ne'elam mimenu. So we say because it's the Torah, we had the drasha before, but because it's an interesting thing. We say because it's learned out from a drasha, from a deduction from a pasuk, from the inference of the pasuk. That means it's only over here, but in other places, it's not a rule throughout the Torah that a suffix yediyah is going to be mechalik. But in the case of you're always going to need a yediyah ba'al. Answer Rabbi Yochanan. El Reish Lakish thing as a yediyah suffix over there in the case of the ashram tali. Adamukam klei Rabbi Yishmael. Why did he have to answer the question over here to explain Rebbe, to say that he's going like Rabbi Yishmael who says you don't need yediyah at all for a carbon oil of yard? Nukma karebi. Say like Rebbe. Rebbe was saying that we do accept the yediyah suffix. So like Gemara, no. He wanted to say it's like Rabbi Yishmael because he wanted to tell us something. The reason why Rish Lakish said it's like Rabbi Yishmael is to tell us Hakamash Malan Rabbi Yishmael. He's going to tell us. He wants to tell us the rule. He could have Taka said it's going like Rebbe, but he wanted to say it's like Rabbi Yishmael because he wanted to tell us the din that Rabbi Yishmael holds you don't need a yediyah. It's like Nemar Pshita Delay Boy. Rabbi Yishmael learns the pasuk of an elam to tell you his other din, right? That he's being chaylik as far as whether you need helam tumah or helam mikdash. He holds you need both helam, that either helam tumah or helam mikdash is chay. Since he's using the pasuk of an elam for helam mikdash, it's not available like the other mandamrim who use an elam, and like we just saw a minute ago in Rabbi Yochanan from Venelam, that Venelam to tell you that the yediyah suffix is that you need a yediyah. So he doesn't have a pasuk to tell you yediyas, and he doesn't hold of yediyas. So what do we need? Again, it's pshita. It's pashat that Rabbi Yishmael doesn't hold. You need a yediyah betchila because he uses Venelam, which is where The other man that I'm learning from, he uses it for a different purpose. So the Gemara says, no, just the fact that he uses the pasuk Nelam for something else would not necessarily tell you that he doesn't hold Yedias. It could be that he has a Messiah from his Rebbeim that there's no Yedias. He has a different, which we would have to figure out how he would learn it out, but maybe he had a Messiah, just the fact that he doesn't learn out from Nelam, so it was still necessary for Reish Lakish to say it's like Rabbi Yishmael, because he wanted to teach us the lesson that Rabbi Yishmael holds that you don't need Yedias, in spite of the fact that he doesn't have the pasuk of a Nelam available for it. It could be that he would have held that you do need Yedias from a different purpose, therefore Reish Lakish will benefit in saying that. A bit confusing. But the etzem question of the paths and the Yedias Sveikas is a very interesting svara. So we're done with Kachim, we're done with Tumah. Now going back to what should be familiar from Masechtas Nedarim, the issues of Shavuos and Nedarim. I'm just going to give you a quick reminder for those who are not here for Nedarim. There are two ways a person can make it's very lumdish thing. There are two ways a person can swear. You can make a shvuah, you can make a neder. A shvuah is where a person says, this thing is also to me. It's saying about himself, I am not allowed to eat this thing. A neder is on an object. He says, this cup is also to me, or this person's belongings are also to me. But he's going on the belongings, on the object. So to put it in contemporary Lashon, it's a gavra, it's a chavtza. Is the shvuah, the isser is on the person, the gavra, and neder, the isser is on the chavtza. Another thing to remind you, which came up a lot in Nedarim, there's such a thing as being matvis a neder, where you say that he doesn't say that this thing is also to me in such crass language. He makes it complicated. He says, I want this to be also to me the same way something else is also to me. Or he says, this is like that other thing that's also. This is hareza. As we're going to see the example the Gemara is going to give on the next plot, he says, I want this day to be to me like Tzom Gedalia. Or this is like Tzom Gedalia to me. Which is, he's saying, I want to fast on that day. Tzom Gedalia, you fast, he's saying, I want it to be. So you it's a neder or a shua of comparison. Okay, those are the two things. Let's start the mission. Shavuos shtayim shehein arba. This is back from the beginning, the first parak. We said Shavuos shtayim shehein arba. Shvua she'oichel v'shaloi oichel. A shvua where he makes a shvua, he swears on himself that I will eat or that I won't eat. If he then violates that shvua, he's going to be chayiv a carbon oila v'yared. She'achalti v'shaloi achalti. And the shehin arba is where he said from the past, he said I ate or I didn't eat, which is learned out. It's not said directly in the pasuk. That's learned out with the limud. So that's shehin arba. Shvua shaloi oichel v'achal kolshu chayiv. What happens if he made a shvua that he's not going to eat, then he ate a kolshu? Chayiv. Divir Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva says you're going to be chayiv even though you only ate a kolshu. Amru loyler Rebbe Kiva. They asked him, everything, if you eat treif, if you eat chametz on Pesach, you eat anything, it's always a kazayis. Why all of a sudden here is it going to be a kolshu? Kolshu means any minimal amount. Amal and Rabbi Akiva, or maybe carbon, shazam medaber, or maybe carbon. There's no comparison. Over here, what he's being mechuyev for is not for the eating. The eating is just a t'nai in order for him to be mechayev for what he said. He's chayev for his shvuah. So the fact that he ate less than a kazayis, his eating, it's not that it's not an eating. He's just, it doesn't depend on the size of the eating. It depends on what he said. So whatever he said, if he eats anything, he was mekayim the t'nai. He fulfilled the condition that he said, I'm not going to eat, and he did eat. So that's enough to be mechayev. Makes sense, right? Zak the Gemara. Correct the Gemara. We said at the beginning that Shtayim is Sha'oichel v'Shaloy. I'm going to eat or that I'm not going to eat. Zak the Gemara, does it really mean when he says Sha'oichel, when he makes a shvua Sha'oichel, does it really mean that he's saying that I'm going to eat in the future? Ramini, shvua loy oichel. If he says a shvua loy oichel, that I won't eat, loy oichel lecha, that I'm not going to eat from yours. He was making a shvua. He was getting. This is very common in Nadarim. People would get into fights, and they would say, I'm not going to touch anything of yours. So he says shvua loy oichel lecha. I'm not going to eat of yours. Shvua she'oichelach. Shvua she'oichelach, which in the context of this Mishnah, of this Brisa, seems to be saying a shvua, I'm making a shvua that I'm not going to eat from you. A shvua if I eat from you. He's trying to say I'm not going to eat from you. Loi shvua she'loi oichelach. Or he says the opposite. He says there's no shvua that I'm not going to eat from you, which means that there is a shvua that I if I do eat from you. Another way of saying the same thing. All these three things that's said in the Brisa are all different ways of saying a shvua that I'm not going to eat from what belongs to you. Also, all these things, once he makes the shvua, it's taka also for him to eat from this. So, but the second one, shvua she'oichelach, is really the same lashon of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says shvua sh'taim she'emaber shvua she'oichel. So why is shvua she'oichelach? We're saying it means that I'm not going to eat, and that I'm not going to eat. And our shvuas, we said shvua she'oichel means that I will eat. How can it mean two opposite things? Amar Abaya, la'olam da'achel namashu. Really, when he says shvua she'oichel, it means that I will eat. Like kasha. Kam b'misar b'lechol. One is talking about where he has people around him that are chanting, eat, 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 like they're egging him on. And the other one is talking about where they're not egging him on. Masnis, in our mission, is talking about there's no one around him telling him to eat. So when he says, shvua she'oichel, he's saying, it sounds like it's pashta, meaning that he's saying, I'm going to eat. Brisa, but people are telling him, go, you go eat. But ka'ama lo yachilna. He's saying, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to eat. And he's protesting, he's telling him, I don't want to eat. And then when he makes a shvua, over there's a reason to believe that what he's making, even though, so the bottom line is when he says shvua she'oichel, it has a primary, generally what it means is, it means I'm going to eat, but it has a potential, there's a less likely interpretation that he's saying that I'm not going to eat. In a case where people are telling him, eat, and he's saying, no, I won't, then he makes a shvua. In that case, since from the context, it seems more likely that he's making a shvua that he's not going to eat, we understand it to mean that he's saying, I'm not going to eat. Rav Ashi Amar, Hani shvua she'i oichelach. He says a different shot. He says over there where it says that where she'oichelach means that I'm not going to eat, you have to change the word. It's not saying she'oichelach, but rather she'i oichelach, that I'm not. Well, he's saying directly, he's saying a different word, she'i oichelach instead of she'oichelach. I'm not going to eat. What's the chiddush to say if he says I oichelach? He's saying I'm not eating. Of course, that means I'm not eating. I might think, even though he said she'i oichelach, what he meant to say is she'oichelach. He's like me; he stumbles over his words, and he meant to say she'oichelach, but he just expressed it incorrectly. She'i oichelach. Kamash v'lan, that no, we take his words at face value. When he says she'i oichelach, it means that I'm not going to eat. Tan Rabban, Mifta Shvua. This we're gonna review this tomorrow, so we're gonna do a first run on it. Tan Rabban, Mifta Shvua. If a person says a mifta, a lashon of mevata, like we said in the original pasuk, kalasher nefesh kishish levata b'sfasayim, the same lashon of bitui. So when a person uses the lashon of bitui, he says I'm being mevata, he means to make a shvua. Iser, the lashon iser is also a lashon shvua. Zak the Brisa, iser. What is this? What is the iser what is the lav? What is the prohibition of the lashon isur? Im ata omer isur shvua chayiv, ve'im lav potter. If you say the lashon of isur is a lashon shvua, then he's going to be chayiv, and if not, it's potter. This is very strange. The first part of the brisa said, Mifta is shvua and isur is shvua. And then we ask, what is the isur of the lashon iser? And we say, it depends on whether the lashon of isur is a lashon shvua. But you just said in the first part of the Mishnah that it is a lashon shvua. Amar Abaye Hachikama, Mifta shvua. Like we said at the beginning, you started the brisa, then Mifta is a shvua. Isur is a lashon mitvus. It's a lashon like we discussed at the beginning in the introduction, that you have sometimes that you can, instead of directly making a shvua or making a neder, you can also make the shvua neder by comparing it to something else. So isur mitvus b'shvua. When he says isur, he's making a mitvus. He's saying he's comparing a shvua to something he had previously asked. Isur. So the Gemara asks, what's the isur? When is isur going to be asur? Imata omer mitvus b'shvua kamoitzi shvua mi pivdami chayiv. It depends. If you say when someone makes a tfisa in a shvua, it's like he's saying the shvua itself, then you chayiv. V'im lav potter. So it's going to depend on whether comparing something when you make a shvua, is that considered to be as if you made the shvua itself? So,
it grabs onto something.
when we say grab, lashon, not literally. I mean, right? Yeah, it's typhus, right? It grabs on, like I said. The example, if he says, "I want today to be like Tzom Gedalia," so instead of saying I want to fast today, I'm being matvasid in Tzom Gedalia. I'm using something else as the comparable. So where would it come from? Where does it come from? The first part that we said that being saying a lashon bita is a shvua. We said someone makes a shvua and it says bita. So you see that bita mevata is a lashon of shvua. Iser nami d'chsev kol neder v'chol shvuas iser, but it says legabe iser also kol neder v'chol shvua. So you see iser is a lashon shvua. So why are you saying iser is a lashon of mitvus? Ella mimai de iser mitvus. Bishvu elamai is a mitzvah bishvu. So if we're saying that just like it says bitui by shvu, it also says neder by shvu. So neder should be it says shvua by iser. So iser should also be a lashon shvua. Why are we saying it's a lashon mitzvah? So elamai is a mitzvah bishvu. So where does it come from that iser is a lashon mitzvah? The chseva iser asar al nafsha. B'shvua. If a person, we put together Isser the Asal Nafsha B'shvua. It says with the base, that means not the shvua itself, but B'shvua using a shvua. That means he uses a shvua to attach to something else. It says a lashon B'shvua by bitui, and no one is saying that bitui is a lashon of means mitzvahs, means just attaching it to something else. El Amar Abaye, so Abaye says mifta shvua. Where do we see mifta is a shvua mehacha? Im hayu tia leish undereh halel a mifta saseh asher asher al nafsha. Beilu shvua like ka'amar. Over there, it says by mifta, it says a lashon bitui. It's talking about legabi a man being mefer the neder of his wife, and it says. It says, or the miftas aseh asher al nafshan, it'll use the lashon iser, and it doesn't mention shvua. So b'may asher atzma b'mevata. So therefore, the pasuk is telling you that bitui is only a lashon of so he asked himself. As I say over here, it's not a lashon iser, but it's my asher atzma b'mevata. So the Torah says a lashon bitui, which doesn't have anything to do. There's no bishvu over there. It's telling you with the bitui itself and not with something else. So that's why bitui is not mitzvahs. Masha enkein, since we had before, like we said, b'shvua by Easter, so that will tell you that it means with a mitzvah. But even though it says a lashon of b'shvua by bitoy, but since we have the second pasuk which says that the lashon of bitoy means directly to aser, we don't learn the b'shvua to tell you that it's also mitzvahs. Okay, we'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow.